say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Officer Ramos. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the invocation by New York City Corrections Chaplain Justin Boydash.
Let us pray. In this moment, within the walls of this beautiful theater, as we gather with solemn intent, I invoke the power of profound embodied service. In particular, I request the descent of blessings, such that we are blessed with the ability to know how to continually, passionately, and with care never forget the impact and the sacrifices made by our first responders and all who are called to serve on and after September 11th, 2001. Likewise, I ask that we remember the tremendous loss of that horrific day, for without memory, the meaningfulness of history is lost. May we be blessed with the ability to never waver, especially when challenged with traversing a road which forces us to remain present and to try to learn to unpack the mysteries of patience in the face of hatred, ignorance, senseless violence, and intolerance. No matter how uncertain that road may appear and how difficult the journey may feel, may we remain aware of and be guided by the internal light created by our service. Thus, I ask in this moment, blessings descend upon all who have stood up, who have lobbied, who have fought, and who have bravely confronted circumstances that threatened the sacred trust that we have with regard to the sacrifices made by those whose lives were impacted on September 11th and over the course of the years since, as well as the years to come. May we never forget. Indeed, may the exemplary service of those who fought for the care of all impacted on that fateful day be celebrated and honored here in this moment. May we never forget. In this moment, I ask that we open up to the possibility that by gathering here in this way, we are creating sacred ground. May we understand that when we gather with singular, unified intent, rooted in the humility needed to serve others without care for fame or personal gain, we manifest an ethos that brings timeless benefit. May we maintain an ethics of dedicated service unhindered by the changing winds of politics and endless news cycles, and understand definitively that the breath upon which our voice is carried is never without efficacy, and that failure to acknowledge this is a failure to understand our power as well as our collective impact. May we always recognize our impact, and even more so, recognize that there may be no place of better power and no action with greater momentum than that of selfless service. May we be blessed with the ability to remain connected and inspired by that which is just, that which is right, and that which is true. And so in this moment, I ask that the power of what we hold most dear act as witness to this sacred gathering today. And in the spirit of Shantideva, an 8th century Indian Buddhist scholar, may I be a protector for those who are without protectors, a guide for travelers, a boat, a bridge, and a ship for those who wish to cross over. May I be a lamp for those who seek light, a bed for those who seek rest, and may I be a servant for all beings who deserve a servant. Thus inspired, with the heart essence of this commitment towards one another born deeply in our core, I ask that we all be blessed and can receive these blessings. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Boydash. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Wills, and I'm so honored to be here with you today as your mistress of ceremonies. Over the years, I have gotten to know so many of the people on this stage, so many of the people in this very audience. We are a community shaped by what happened here in our fair city on September 11th, 2001. It was a bright and sunny morning. My day began at home on Long Island. By the time I reached the New York One newsroom, both towers had been hit. We rushed downtown to do what we do. I was there shortly after the second tower fell. And for all of us, those images of 9/11 are indelible. The mayhem of first responders rushing in, of people running out. And for me, and so many of us here, they're more than images. They're painful memories. I want to tell you about someone that I recently interviewed a few weeks ago. For Michael O'Connor, the bright, sunny, late summer morning of 9/11 also started on Long Island. Michael was a 25-year-old probie at the time who had just recently made the transition from the NYPD to the FDNY. He rushed to his firehouse in Queens and from there straight to Lower Manhattan, starting on September 11th, but also on September 12th, September 13th, and on. In the days and weeks to follow, Michael was among the thousands of first responders digging through the rubble, searching for survivors in hopes of saving, even finding one of their own. He said there was nothing that was going to stop us from trying to get them home to their families. That's what he told me on television. Years after inhaling the fumes of that toxic pile, Michael, still a young man, woke up one day feeling, as he put it, as though he had been beaten with a baseball bat. He couldn't move. He had a 104-degree fever, and soon enough, he was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease. Michael's career was cut short. His life was in danger. His initial goal, he told me, was to hang on long enough to see the birth of his first child. As a country, we rewarded his heroism by making him walk the halls of Congress, fighting for the care and support that he and his colleagues so desperately needed and so categorically deserved. I've spent 3 decades covering the life of this city. What Michael had to go through made me angry as a journalist, as a New Yorker, and as the daughter of a New York City firefighter. Jon Stewart was so right, ladies and gentlemen, when he told lawmakers to do their jobs. He was right when he said, do those jobs with the same courage, grace, tenacity, and humility that people like Michael have shown. So today, I'm grateful. I'm relieved that as a country, we have righted this wrong. Today's ceremony is about honoring some of the people who fought so hard for the justice our first responders and survivors deserved. Having interviewed so many of them, I know each of them would insist that they did not do this alone. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding every single person who stood at a rally, wrote a letter, traveled to Washington, who picked up the phone. You made this happen. The September 11th Victim Compensation Fund is now permanently funded. And we are a grateful city. And I'm honored, truly honored, to share this moment with you as we bestow the Bronze Medallion, New York City's highest civic honor, on the heroes seated right behind me. It is now my privilege and my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of the City of New York, Bill de Blasio.
Cheryl, thank you for bearing witness over these years, for telling the stories of these good men and women and their families, for talking about the injustice that so many experienced. Your anger and your passion, your love for all those who did so much for us, it helped spread a message that had to be spread. And you know, as the daughter of a firefighter, what it means to grow up in a family that gives so much to all of us. Your words have really, really helped us to get to this day. Let's thank Cheryl for all she has done. We're here at a time of year when we are thankful, when we all end up taking stock of what's happened this year, what's happened in our lives, what's happened for our families. And it's a time of year we want to celebrate. We want to be joyful. We celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and Three Kings Days, and we celebrate the faith that keeps us going. But we're also here gathered together because of an injustice that occurred, because of so much pain that was inflicted that should not have been, because those who did so much for us were not given what they deserved. So it's a bittersweet moment as we gather today. But we gather as a community. All of you formed a community, a righteous community of people fighting for some fairness, some decency, some recognition. We're going to honor some really wonderful people up here for all they have done. But every single person here was part of fighting for fairness, for all the hardworking men and women who put their lives on the line. So we're going to celebrate great people, great organizations that were there and fought all the way through to victory. But we also need to celebrate every single member of this good community who stood shoulder to shoulder. So look around you, look at each other who was there for this fight. Please give each other a round of applause. We know that we are here because of the worst day in our history as a city. Absolutely, without question, our worst day in the hundreds of years that New York City has existed. And yet, we saw that day and every day since the best of New York. The entire world watched as New York City set a standard for brotherhood, for kindness, for strength, for bravery, for courage. And then, for 18 long years, reminded our nation that you can't just give lip service to those who serve. You actually have to do something about it for them and their families. This community made a huge difference. It took longer than anyone would have liked. It took longer than it should have, but this community won in the end. We're here to honor today those who sustained this fight, those who believed that we could not give up. And it begins with honoring the men and women who did the work, the first responders who rushed in that day, no matter what the odds. The people worked on the pile, who led the cleanup. The men and women who worked at fresh kills and at the morgues. They all felt a commitment to the families and to all who had served. They didn't give up. We're honoring all those people. They may not have famous names, but we're honoring each and every one of them. We're honoring the unions that represent them. Because I want to remind you, the health, the well-being of everyone who went there to the pile, to the recovery effort, to the rescue effort, to find the remains of a loved one. The government was supposed to ensure their health. But it wasn't the government who sounded the alarm. It was the labor unions. It was the labor unions who said, something's wrong here. And I want to thank each and every one of them for fighting for their members. I'm going to call out names, and I ask you to applaud for them all. One who could not be with us today, but as the chair of the Municipal Labor Committee, plays such an important role and has for years in this fight, President of Sanitation Workers, Local 831 of the Teamsters, Harry Nespoli. To the co-chair of the Municipal Labor Committee and the executive director of DC 37 AFSCME, Henry Garrido. The president of the Uniformed Firefighters Association, Gerard Fitzgerald. The president of the Uniformed Fire Officers Association, Jake Lamonda. The president of AFSCME Local 2507, Uniform EMTs, Paramedic and Fire Inspectors, Oren Barzilay. The president of the Police Benevolent Association, Pat Lynch. The president of the Captains Endowment Association, Roy Richter. The president of the Lieutenants Benevolent Association, Lou Turco. President of the Sergeants Benevolent Association, Ed Mullins. The Vice President of the Detectives Endowment Association, Paul DiGiacomo. The President of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association, Elias Husamaddin. The President of the Correction Captains Association, Patrick Ferraiolo. The President of SEIU Local 246, Joe Colangelo. The President of Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, Gary LaBarbera. The President of DC 37 Local 983, Joseph Palaio. And all the representatives of labor, thank you. Thank you for all you did for your members and all you did for New York City. Next, I want to note those who could be here and those who could not from the United States Senate and the United States House. We all know that there were members of both bodies who did not heed the call, who did not recognize the pain and suffering of the families, no matter how many extraordinary individuals appealed to them personally. There were some who looked away. But we're here to celebrate those who took up the cause, who believed, who fought for all the men and women who put themselves in harm's way. Two who could not be with us today because of the work they're doing in Washington at this hour, Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Let's give them a round of applause. You will hear in a moment from one of the great heroes of this fight. And she is wearing with such pride the jacket of the Fdny that is a famous image of her fighting at the front line in Washington. For those who needed the help, she was tenacious. She never stopped fighting. She believed, and she believed in her whole heart. Let's thank Congressmember Carolyn Maloney. Not yet, not yet, not yet. And this fight was not business as usual. It was about heart and soul. It was about caring about human beings. It was not about politics. Too much politics got in the way, but everyone who fought for justice didn't do it out of political motivation. They did it out of human commitment. I say that because I want to commend the other member of Congress with us here. And this is a statement of pure nonpartisanship. Pete King, we will miss you. Thank you, Pete, for all you have done. And I want to call the roll of all the others who joined in this fight from the New York delegation, again, so many of whom could not be here because of activities in Washington today. First of all, one who fought so hard and made sure the bill got through committee, Congressmember Eliot Engel. Let's thank him. And I'm going to call out all the names. We can just do a rolling applause. Hopefully they'll hear down in Washington, D.C. Congressmember Jose Serrano, Congressmember Jerry Nadler, Congressmember Adriano Espaillat, Congressmember Max Rose, Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congressmember Grace Meng, Congressmember Nydia Velasquez, Congressmember Hakeem Jeffries, Congressmember Gregory Meeks, Congressmember Tom Suozzi, and Congressmember Yvette Clarke. There were people and organizations, individuals who cared so much, who helped us put today's event together, who donated to make sure that we could honor people. I want to just ask you to give a resounding round of applause to all the sponsors of today's event. And then from the city government, each of whom has worked so hard to try and support those who have suffered and given so much. First of all, he served this city on 9/11 at Ground Zero and has served for so many years since, thank God, our Fire Commissioner, Dan Nigro. NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea, NYPD First Deputy Commissioner Ben Tucker, Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, Correction Commissioner Cynthia Brand, and Emergency Management Commissioner Deanne Criswell. And a special thank you to our colleagues in government. We have all worked in common cause, and I thank them for all they've done. The Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Rick Cotton, and the Superintendent of the New York State Police, who is representing all of the state government here today, Keith Corlett. So I'm going to be brief before we give these medals, and we will hear from Congressmember Maloney as well on behalf of all of her colleagues. This is a somber ceremony in so many ways, even though we celebrate such good people and we celebrate a victory. But there's three things we need to keep in mind, and we need to keep this in mind very humbly. One, the folks we are honoring today, it's not everyone who deserves to be honored, because we have lost some of those who deserve the honor the most. We will recognize them, but they won't be here to accept their honor, and we are the lesser for that. There are people suffering with illness, grievous illness, who could not be here. There are heroes that we have lost, like Detective James Zadroga, firefighter Ray Pfeiffer, Detective Lou Alvarez, and EMT Deborah Reeve. This ceremony honors everyone, but this ceremony can't really be complete because they're not here. But I ask for a moment of silence for all we have lost. Thank you. A second point we must keep in the front of our minds. No one in this extraordinary community, no one did it alone. Every single person who fought for justice had the support of their families, their spouses, their loved ones. Every step of the way, they had the support of their unions. Even when our federal government did not do its job, so many others did their job and then some. And the last thing to keep in mind is this is by no means a moment of closure. It's a moment to recognize progress, but we have so much more to do for all those who are suffering and for their families, and we must continue. New York City must continue to stand by all those who served us. So even with this powerful mix of feelings, let's also be proud. Let's be proud of the good. Let's recognize the good, the extraordinary good that's been done. Let's recognize the persistence. You should not have to everyone up here, to everyone gathered, you should not have had to fight this fight, but thank God you did. There is a simple message in our founding documents of our republic. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Supporting our heroes should have been self-evident. I can't believe that there wasn't an emergency vote of Congress and it didn't pass the first day. I don't think anyone else here can believe that, but people fought nonetheless. It should have been a no-brainer from the beginning. It should have been nonpartisan. It should have been by acclamation. But it wasn't. And so you fought, and you kept fighting. You kept showing up. Year after year, you refused to accept the injustice. And you got the job done. A lot of times, we say two powerful words. They are moving words. Never forget. But you didn't just treat never to forget as words. You made it something more. You made never forget not just a slogan. You made it a promise, and you kept your promise. And that's why we gather today to bestow the Bronze Medallion, the city's highest civic honor. It is given for exceptional citizenship and outstanding achievement that reaches people across all 5 boroughs. In the entire history of this city, there are no people and no organizations more worthy. When you think how many families now have a measure of peace, how many families can now make ends meet, how many people get the health care they deserve because of all we are honoring today. I'll conclude with this statement of honesty. Even the most beautiful honor, the most beautiful medallion will not bring back those who we lost. We know that. It won't end the suffering of those who right now are fighting for their lives. But today we'll recognize there are good people in the world. Today's gathering recognizes there are people who really understand what it means to see the person next to you as your brother or your sister, to believe that we have a debt to those who served us, and to make sure we pay that debt. It can never fully be repaid, for sure. But people need to know we will stand by them. And today we mark an example of goodness, persistence, of decency, of honor. To all those who are being honored today, your city thanks you. All 8.6 million New Yorkers, thank you. To everyone who is a part of this fight, thank you. And may we never have to fight again for justice for people who have done so much. May we always honor them, love them, embrace them, and support them. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today, as the mayor said, we thank all of our representatives in Washington, especially those who led the fight to secure permanent funding for the Victim Compensation Fund. To speak on their behalf, it is now my honor to introduce Representative Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. And I want to begin by thanking Mayor de Blasio for bringing us together today to mark this historic achievement. It has been the honor of my life to work alongside the others who are recognized today for their work to make this program permanent. In the history of our nation, there has been very few entitlement programs, most notably Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and the 9/11 Health and Compensation Victims Compensation Act, entitlement there for the lives of our people. This is the culmination of almost 18 years of hard work by first responders, advocates, survivors, and their families. But I want to begin by thanking the true twin towers of New York, New York's police and fire. Pat Lynch, NYPD, Jake LaMonda, UFOA, and Gerald Fitzgerald, UFAA. They have a 9/11 every day, and they're out there protecting us. Thank you so much. We have the best in the nation, the best in the world. And I want to thank the entire labor movement that the mayor so graciously mentioned. They were our rock on which to lean. They helped provide research, their time, their effort, their funding for our cause. They are a big part of our achievement and victory. And I want to thank my own staff, Ben Shavat, my chief of staff, who was beside me, worked with me throughout this long, long ordeal. And Lila Nordstrom, and my friend John Field and the Feel Good Foundation. And John Stewart, who galvanized a nation behind us. He was a game changer. I wish I could have him by my side in all my fights. He was remarkable. I just wish that it hadn't taken so long and that we hadn't lost so many along the way. This moment is for James Zadroga, Ray Pfeiffer, Louis Alvarez, and all of the others who have gotten sick or passed away because of their time spent at Ground Zero, the Pentagon, or Shanksville. Thank you so much for your sacrifice. When those planes hit on September 11th, our first responders didn't hesitate. They rushed in to help as others were fleeing. And in the weeks and months after, they kept coming. From every state and city, tens of thousands of firefighters, police officers, federal and local law enforcement officers, medical workers, construction workers, and other heroes selflessly rushed to Ground Zero, the Pentagon and Shanksville crash site, to dig through the rubble. Now those who helped are left paying a terrible price: their health, and for too many, their lives. It isn't enough to praise the heroism of those who rushed towards the disaster. It's not enough to simply say, remember 9/11. 9/11's not a bumper sticker. If you remember 9/11, you remember that we as a nation vowed to never forget. Now, thankfully, Congress has finally turned that promise into a lasting law. They should never again have to ask for the care they need to stay alive and the compensation they need to rebuild their lives and take care of their families. That is the least we can do as a grateful nation. The permanent reauthorization of the 9/11 Victims' Compensation Fund is a victory for everyone who walked the halls of Congress, who refused over and over again to take no for an answer. It is a win for everyone who showed up to save lives and rebuild our nation. While for many 9/11 is a distant memory, our first responders, survivors, and their families will be living with the effects of that day for the rest of their lives. While we will never be able to relieve them of that burden, we made sure that the support promised to them will be available whenever they need it. I am so thankful to every one of my colleagues who made this possible, particularly my partners in Congress, Congressman Nadler, King, Engel, Senators Gillibrand, Schumer, and Gardner, and the entire New York delegation. But most importantly, I want to thank those who were there on that day and in the halls of Congress ever since for making sure that never forget truly means never forget. Thank you. It's my honor to be part of this effort. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to invite to the stage Representative Pete King.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you very much. I will make my remarks very brief. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for arranging this today, for his leadership and his efforts throughout this fight to obtain the 9/11 Health Care and Compensation Fund to make sure it was done. Of course, thank Carolyn, Jerry, Chuck, and Kirsten for their help. I see Elliot Engel is down here. He's been a great advocate on so many causes involving New York and our country. I just wanted to say that on 9/11, that was the worst day, the most sorrowful day in the history of our country, but also it was in many ways the greatest day because it showed how our country could come together. Most importantly, it showed how New York could come together. New Yorkers are a different breed. My father was a city cop for many years. I was born and raised in New York City. It's an exceptional place. There's nothing like it. And all of you are here today, all of those sitting behind me, the guts they showed day after day, week after week, month after month. To me, this is a bittersweet day. It's sweet because finally the families of those who died, those who are suffering, will get the compensation that they are entitled to and have the peace of mind as they go forward. It's bitter because we realize that, as Luis Alvarez said, this isn't like winning the jackpot. This isn't like winning the sweepstakes. The only way you get the compensation is if you died, if someone in your family is suffering, if you lost your occupation, your means of employment. So only those who suffer get this funding. But that's gratifying, so at least they know that what happened on 9/11 was not in vain, that those men, those brave men and women who did what they had to do on that day in the weeks, months, and years after are entitled to what they, and they're finally going to get what they're entitled to get. They deserve it all along. So again, Mayor, thank you for this today. Thank all of the first responders, construction workers, court officers, probation officers, corrections officers, everybody who is, and part of this great struggle for New York to come back to be stronger and more vibrant and vital than ever. Thank you all. God bless America.
And before we present our honors, we'd like to acknowledge Congressman Eliot Engel. Please stand and be recognized. Thank you all for being here. Okay, now the mayor will bestow the Bronze Medallion. Again, this is New York City's highest civic honor to our honorees on stage today. Some of our honorees are here, others are being honored posthumously for their service, and they're represented today by their friends and family. Please join me in applauding each one as we recognize them for their service. Louis Alvarez. And just, you could stand for pictures. I just want to read this brief description. Detective Lou Alvarez spent weeks on the pile, clearing rubble and recovering remains. His powerful and emotional plea before Congress was a pivotal moment in securing permanent funding for the Victim Compensation Fund. Accepting on his behalf is his wife, Lainey, and his brother, Phil. Our next honoree, Paul Brown. Chief Brown is the head of personnel management at the New York City Department of Sanitation. He responded to Ground Zero, working with sanitation teams to clear the rubble, and was a staunch and ardent advocate to permanently fund the VCF. Ben Shavat. Ben Shavat is the executive director of 9/11 Health Watch and previously coordinated congressional efforts to pass the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act as chief of staff for Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. John Field. And I want to say this one thing before I read this quick bio of John Field. Some of you may have seen him come whisper over my shoulder, and when John Field whispers in your ear, you will pay attention, believe me. He said, "Bring up my best friend." His best friend is the retired firefighter that I talked about in my remarks. He is here this morning. Please welcome to the stage Michael O'Connor to join in the award with John Field at his request. Yes. Okay. Originally denied compensation for an injury while clearing debris from Ground Zero, John became a fierce advocate for 9/11 first responders and founded the Feel Good Foundation. John will also accept a medal on behalf of his friend, Jon Stewart. Best known as former host of The Daily Show, Stewart has used his public profile across the country and in the nation's capital to passionately advocate for 9/11 first responders.
Give him the medal.
He said, give him the medal. I said, okay, John. Okay, our next honoree, Kimberly Flynn. As the Director of 9/11 Environmental Action and the Chair for the Survivors Steering Committee, Kimberly Flynn has dedicated her life to advocating on behalf of those exposed to 9/11 related illnesses, particularly children. Lila Nordstrom. A senior at Stuyvesant High School on 9/11, Nyla Nordstrom suffered from exposure near Ground Zero. She passionately lobbied politicians with survivor groups in Washington, D.C., and she founded the organization Sty Health to ensure students exposed during 9/11 were among the groups receiving coverage under the VCF. Richard Palmer. Richard is a retired warden from the New York City Department of Correction who led a temporary morgue during the aftermath of 9/11. Richard has been a key advocate in lobbying Congress members to support the permanence of the VCF. Ray Pfeiffer. A 9/11 first responder and FDNY firefighter, Ray spent months at Ground Zero. He fiercely lobbied for the World Trade Center Health Program Zadroga bill and extended VCF funding. Accepting on Ray's behalf this morning is his wife, Karen, and daughter, Taylor Ray. Deborah Reeve. EMS paramedic Deborah Reeve spent months sorting debris and remains after 9/11 and was one of the first to suffer the devastating health effects of exposure. Deborah's battle with illness inspired advocacy and compensation for those facing 9/11 related ailments, accepting on Deborah's behalf her husband David and her son Mark. James Zadroga. Detective James Zadroga spent hundreds of hours at the World Trade Center site and was the first person whose death was attributed to 9/11 related illness. He became the namesake for the original James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act of 2010. Accepting on his behalf his daughter Taylor Ann, father Joseph, and wife Linda. And we also honor the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey Police Department and civilian employees among the principal first responders during 9/11. The advocacy and leadership from the Port Authority Police and civilians was crucial in ensuring the permanent funding of VCF. Accepting on behalf of the Port Authority Police Department is Edward Setnar, Superintendent of the Port Authority Police Department. And accepting on behalf of the Port Authority civilian employees is Alan Reese, Director of World Trade Center Construction at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. We also honor the uniformed and civilian employees of the City of New York. The New York City Municipal Labor Committee represents public sector employees citywide. Public sector unions were at the center of the fight to ensure their members and all affected by 9/11 illness or injury were getting the care they deserve. Accepting on behalf of the Municipal Labor Committee, Henry Garrido, co-chair of the Municipal Labor Committee and executive director of DC 37. Finally, this morning, we honor the lead co-sponsors from the New York congressional delegation who passed the legislation that permanently funded the VCF. Their advocacy and votes helped ensure that New Yorkers and first responders from around the country affected by 9/11 will receive the care and resources they need. Though they're not able to join us this morning because of business in Washington, first we recognize our senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who worked so hard to win the passage in the U.S. Senate. And we also thank Congressman Gerald Nadler, representative for New York's 10th Congressional District. Joining us today from the House of Representatives are lead sponsors Carolyn B. Maloney, representative for New York's 12th Congressional District, and Congressman Pete King, New York's 2nd Congressional District. I'm glad you're all standing. Please join me in saluting all of our honorees this morning. Please be seated. To honor all the heroes, and especially those who are not able to be here with us, those we've lost, and those who are grappling with illnesses as we speak, please allow me to introduce Sarah Mccain, Fdny emergency medical technician. She will perform Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that, Sarah. As our program comes to a close, allow me to introduce our final musical performance, the New York City Police Department Jazz Band, which will perform God Bless America.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with gold. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Now we will have our closing benediction.
Because of the nature of this beautiful ceremony, perhaps we remain seated. This is more a reflective prayer in terms of the beauty of the people we honor. Let us pray. At this special time of year, as the days grow shorter and the nights grow longer, many of us prepare to celebrate festivals of light, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas. The religious message of Christmas assures us that God is never far from us all. Rather, our God is very close by, among us and within us. Moreover, God promises to support us as we must shoulder the burdens of life that inevitably come our way. But God also expects us to help shoulder the burdens of one another. Today, at this medallion ceremony, we give thanks for men and women who have gone the extra mile and then some in order to ensure that the heroes of 9/11 receive the support which they so justly deserve in their own time of need. It has been said that it is better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. As we celebrate today's honorees, each of whom has become a light in the darkness for their neighbors in need, so may all of us be inspired to be light for others too, by living that golden rule of doing unto others. For it is by enriching the lives of those around us that our own lives are enriched as well. And so, as we get ready to experience this most wonderful time of the year, we thank you, dear God, for the good people who help to make it so, today and tomorrow and always. Amen.
And before we go, I just want to do some quick acknowledgments. Borough President of Manhattan, Gail Brewer, is here. We're so happy she could join us, along with State Senator Robert Jackson, Assembly Member David Weprin, and Council Member Idanique Miller. Please give them a round of applause. And quickly, we'd also like to thank our sponsors this morning: the Mayor's Fund to Advance New York City, the ABNY Foundation, Brookfield, Con Edison, the FDNY Foundation, the New York Yankees, the Real Estate Board of New York, and Tech NYC. Thanks to our sponsors. And lastly, thank all of you for being here on this historic day. I'd like to thank our host, James Dolan, for the beautiful Beacon Theater. Wasn't this a lovely venue to have this historic event today? And the Madison Square Garden Company. God bless you all. Happy holidays, and the best to each and every one of you in the new year. Thank you.